Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, a longtime resident of Beverly Hills, and welcome to Beverly Hills View. We have a guest today who is also a longtime resident of Beverly Hills, the director of the Gagosian Gallery, Deborah McLeod. Deborah was born and raised in Piedmont, and I think it's like the Beverly Hills of San Francisco. She went to Piedmont High School, and while all of her friends went to Stanford and Cal, she came to UCLA, where she earned a bachelor's in arts history. She loved it here, and she stayed. She became the director of the Blum Helman Gallery prior to a long stint at Christie's auction house. And when Gagosian Gallery expanded, Deborah oversaw the expansion. She has 3 sons who played Little League Baseball with our Manuel Perez, and we have fond memories of that because it kind of brought the community together. Let's start there, Deborah.
Sure, it's a great place to start with Little League. Yeah, I grew up in Piedmont, as you mentioned, a small town, and graduated from Piedmont High with the kids that I went to kindergarten with.
Oh,
and
like Beverly Hills, like just growing up here.
Exactly. And my husband had done the same. He had grown up in a small town in Connecticut, and we liked this idea of public school. So when we got married, he had moved here from Boston, and I was living near LA County Museum, and we decided on Beverly Hills for the schools.
Oh, right. And it was a great choice.
It was a great choice. We had a realtor. I looked at the grammar schools and thought that El Rodeo looked best to me, so I had the realtor only look in that district. And she found us a wonderful house on Linden Drive, and we moved in and had 3 sons and really enjoyed the soccer and the Little League and walking to school. We thought was a great experience, and attending with your neighbors. And
exactly. It was like community. When we would go to the Little League games at La Cienega, we knew everyone.
Right.
And I think a lot of those people developed their career paths in Beverly Hills. Even they were living here, and they were also sending their kids to school and working here. Did you find it was like Piedmont in a way?
Yeah, a little different. Piedmont has 1 gas station, 1 bank, and a convenience store. But so Beverly Hills, of course, has this sensational retail component that Piedmont didn't have. So Piedmont's a little more like Mayberry, I would say. But fancy, and San Francisco was just a hop, skip, and a jump across the bay.
Beautiful big homes in Piedmont, just
Yes.
like Beverly Hills, I think.
Yes.
Am I right? When you were there, were you interested in art?
You know, really, this was a kind of a Republican bastion, I would say, and there was a lot of privilege, but there wasn't really any contemporary art that I saw. People, had souvenirs from trips to Europe on the wall. You know what I mean? You'd bring home
Your family didn't collect?
My parents collected English Queen Anne furniture.
Oh, well,
so the collecting gene, I think I did acquire from my parents.
Right.
But what was on the wall were sort of corny paintings from trip to Europe, and then like sort of portraits of the children, photographs, memories.
Right,
yeah,
right,
and
right.
I still have to say to my parents, who are 85 and 90, that art's job is not to decorate, because they're stuck there. So they just cannot imagine what I'm doing at the gallery, because there's very little that is decorative.
Exactly.
And
but
legitimate.
It's speaking to you. And when you put something on the wall, you want it to make a difference in your life.
You want it to challenge you, remind you
of
how you feel and who you are, and you want it to, that's really the job of contemporary art as you and I see it.
Right. When you went to UCLA, did you take any art classes with any of the artists there? You did? Do you know how to paint?
No, I don't. No, I did. I started as a pre-law as an English major. And my very first fall quarter at UCLA, I took an art history class, Baroque art, and I was just done in. That was it. I was so excited to find this major. I fell in love with it, and I studied with Carlo Pedretti, who was the world's leading scholar on Leonardo da Vinci, and he was really great to study with.
But you couldn't hang out with any of those artists.
No,
they were all
that's
gone.
Right.
So you actually took a different path because you hang out with all those artists now.
Yeah, so I graduated with the degree in Northern Italian Renaissance and Baroque art.
Right. Were you traveling?
And,
did you go see it in Europe?
I did. Oh, yes, I did. I went to go see those artists and loved them, and then got a job at a company that put art in buildings.
So that was your first job?
Yeah, that was my first job.
And what kind of art were they putting?
It sort of prints, sort of cheesy prints.
Right.
So, but then I found my way to Ace Gallery.
Oh, that's where you went first.
That was really my first real gallery job, and it was brief.
And where was
I was there
it?
8 months.
Was it in Beverly Hills at the time?
Ace was on Melrose, next to Art and Architecture Books in a Frank Gehry building. Right there.
Right.
Remember where Gemini is now?
Right.
Yeah.
So from there.
So that was a shock to my system. I thought that contemporary art was sort of unfriendly and snobby. What's a blank painting? That's not art. I kind of had that, came from that point of view.
But it was from your background,
yes.
your art history background, because that's Baroque art.
Right, which is all...
Everything's filled,
yes.
right? The whole canvas is filled. And you're
totally filled, totally figurative,
Right.
recognizable, generally
Exactly.
rooted in the Bible or in politics.
You can tell what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I really owe that to Ace Gallery. It shocked me, and it was a Robert Therian show, was the first show that we had when I started there. And it just took to it like a duck to water.
And then did you
So
go to
I
Blum
was
Helman?
converted. So I worked for Doug for a short time, and then I went to work for Jan Turner at
yes.
8000 Melrose.
Right.
And that was a wonderful experience for me.
She had a different set of artists.
Yes, she
More
showed
ethnic
locals.
And locals, yes.
So, and they were in the gallery all the time. So we had Mineo Mizuno, Elsa Rady,
Right. Right.
Carlos Almaraz.
She had a different take on art. As I said, she had more of the ethnic feel, right? Or with a kind of relationship with not white American male.
Right. We had quite a few women.
Yeah,
we had
you?
Lita Albuquerque,
Right,
Sigrid
and-
Burton,
And Elsa, as you said.
Elsa.
Beautiful work, very ceramic.
And Juanita Jimenez. You remember Juanita?
No, I don't remember her. When you left Jan, because she had a small gallery, right? And when you left her, then where'd you go? So you were building your background in art.
Yes. I mean, if I were to go back and design it, I wouldn't change anything. You know, working for Jan was then like a mom and pop shop.
Exactly.
We literally would sweep at the front door. I mean, my title was co-director of the gallery, but you know, I would sweep the front.
Answer the phone.
Answer the phones. We sat at the front desk. Claire Gould
right.
and myself, who was my co-director and fabulous partner. She's just a great, great person in my life. And we would, do you remember the little tiny font when you would type up slide labels?
Oh, yes.
And we would literally affix the labels to the slides. This was the way we looked at art in those days,
Right.
were little tiny slides.
But people would come into you with their slides, right?
We would look at
That's how you
them.
would look at them.
We would look at them.
Because they didn't have any internet.
Yeah,
and I know you
put them on a light box, and you'd go down with your
Right.
loop, and you'd look at art like this, and if it
as
looked
if
interesting.
the loop, I mean, who cares what it looks like? You want to see the image, right?
Right.
You don't want to see something close up, but that's what we were doing.
That's how we did it. And 1 in 20 would look like something I should walk into Jan's office.
Oh,
which I
like
would then do and say, I saw a couple of interesting things over the last month, and I'd show her, and she might say, that looks interesting, have that person come in. And we did find artists that way.
That's how you found your artists. They would bring you they would call you. Are you interested?
Or
and
they
you'd
just
say,
come
give
in.
us, or
You could recognize them right away with the shoulder thing.
And
They
give
would
me
come
your
in and
slides.
reach in for their big slides. And,
right.
Yeah.
And from Jan?
So Jan, I worked for 3 years. And as I say, I learned to do everything. I learned to handle art. I learned to hang art. I learned to label art, type invoices. I really learned everything. You know, put the coffee pot on in the morning. And I'm so grateful for all of that. And I notice with young people that work for me now at the gallery, they sometimes don't want to do any of those things. And I think it's so important that
But you could have opened your own gallery because
Yes.
you learned every single aspect of it. And I think your career has encompassed every aspect, because when I talked about Christie's, when you went to Christie's, that's a whole different feel than being in a gallery, than having a gallery and having
Absolutely.
a space to work with. All right, then where did you go?
So then I heard, I was very happy working for Jan, but I heard that the legendary Irving Blum,
yes,
who had opened the Ferris Gallery in 1959, 8,
yeah.
7, was returning to Los Angeles to open a gallery. The art scene had started to percolate and simmer, and artists were starting to stay in LA instead of move away. That was happening. There was, Art Forum was.
What year are we talking about?
We're
80s.
now talking about 86.
80s, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I wrangled an interview with Irving Blum. I think Sid Felson called on my behalf, or maybe Doug Kramer. Someone wonderful called on my behalf and said, "There's a girl you should hire."
Right, and someone who actually knew Irving, and probably if it were Doug, he had bought something.
Yes.
And also he had an entree.
And they flew me to New York, and I was so nervous.
Oh, they did?
Yes, I was so nervous, and of course there was no internet then. So I studied up on the gallery. I tell my boys this all the time. Went to the Beverly Hills Library,
right.
And I did my research. And when I got to New York, I knew every single thing there was to know about the Blum Helman Gallery. They hired me on the spot.
They were already in New York.
Oh, yes.
They had already established a Blum Helman there.
Yeah. They had the 57th Street Gallery, which is a very prestigious gallery.
Right.
They represented Ellsworth Kelly and Roy Lichtenstein and Andy, many great artists.
Right.
And Donald Sultan in those days.
And Kelly.
Ellsworth.
Yep.
It was a big part of the program, Ellsworth. And we had a gallery on Green Street.
Oh.
And then Irving wanted to kind of come home. He wanted to have a small gallery in Los Angeles. So they hired me, and I flew back and walked onto this construction site. He'd selected the space, and it was on Colorado and 9th.
Oh, that was the very beginning. Right, right.
And that was, you remember at that moment, there were these couple of areas of density. There was right there at Colorado, in that space, Fred Hoffman had Hoffman Borman Gallery. Potter Pence was next door to us. And there were several galleries in that building. And
I remember. Now I remember. It was a long,
strip mall.
It
was
a
strip mall.
Okay, I remember.
Jim Corcoran was sort of the leading dealer there on 5th Street.
So that was the beginning of artists all coming together, galleries together, where you could walk from one to the other.
Yes.
And I think the gallerists were friendly as well.
We were.
Because you had different artists that you represented, right?
Yes, and we would visit each other all the time. We coordinated our openings so that we would all open on one night, and there'd be a big lot of empty cups in the parking lot the next morning. And it made it feel like there was density. Irving Blum always said that's what LA lacked.
So he opened it there.
And I ran it for 5 years, and then the art market crashed. That was 1990.
I was going to say that was the beginning of, okay.
And Blum Helman contracted, like many galleries did, and we closed that branch at that time.
I remember you from then.
Yeah.
I remember now talking about that. But going back to that gallery, you were curating, you were doing publications, you were doing catalogs, invitations, and as the director.
Yes. Yeah.
So you had this expertise, right? And were you working with, say, Roy Lichtenstein? Were you friendly with him? Were you friendly with Ellsworth?
Yes, very friendly with Ellsworth in particular, and Roy was fantastic. These artists, the old guard,
right?
They are so fantastic, so great to work with. Those two in particular. We also showed Robert Rauschenberg, and these artists would also all come to LA to work at Gemini. Oh,
so that was your connection to Felson and.
So they would come to do a print, and they'd come and hang out at the gallery, and we would.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Then you took a big shift.
Yes.
Then you went to Christie's.
Yes.
I know.
This is serendipity. We closed the gallery, and I thought, okay,
now what?
I lost my job. Like, wow, that's sort of a badge of honor. That has to happen in your life. You have to fall down a little bit. So, but luckily, I was getting married in 2 months' time in San Francisco, my hometown. So we just closed up the gallery in December, and I relaxed and planned my wedding, got married, and your viewers will laugh at this, but when we came home from Europe from our honeymoon, and on my answering machine, which is how we got information in those days, there was a message from Martha Baer at Christie's saying, "Hi, Deborah, this is Martha Baer, and I'd like to talk to you. I understand the gallery closed. I'd like to talk to you." So I just walked right into Christie's.
She was great, wasn't she?
She was great. She's still there.
Where was that building?
That was it was a cruddy 3rd floor walk-up in Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive, right there on Rodeo in the 300 block. And we weren't expecting clients there. It wasn't a place to receive clients.
So what were you supposed to do in an auction house? You couldn't do publications. You couldn't do catalogs. You didn't have walls to hang your art on. What are you supposed to do?
So I was a business getter. That's what we called it. And there were three of us who were specialists. David Gooding, who was a car specialist, who's now probably the best in the world.
Oh, with the cars,
Yes,
right?
David
Yes,
Gooding, Google
right.
David. And James de Givenchy,
Oh, right. And he was
the
doing,
nephew of Hubert, who's a fantastic jewelry designer now and has a big career, and myself. So we were three young people there, sitting in a little suite of offices with.
But
kind of
Martha
indoor-
wasn't here. She was in New York.
right.
Right? So you were running this. on
Well, I
Rodeo.
know I was really
What do you mean the group was?
I was a remote member of Christie's contemporary art team. I was the only remote member. So I really belonged to the New York team. I just lived out here. And then the thrust of the other staff was estates and appraisals. So those were meeting with lawyers, of course.
How do you get those? That was my question, because you were supposed to bring in estates. And as you said, a getter of goods.
Right. Well, I knew all those people from Blum Helman. I mean, I had that privilege. They all loved Irving. They all came to the gallery. And I had the old guard clients and young people too. So basically I was in my car and, out, you're visiting clients all the time, sitting down, looking at their collections and doing appraisals. And this would turn into business when someone's ready.
So appraisals.
Didn't I ever do an appraisal for you?
I think you probably
did.
Because
Yeah.
I remember from those days. But did you also teach people how to bid? Because people were afraid to bid. That was pretty new, the auction market
Yes.
for us out here.
Well, that was a real service I could provide, was that I could sit down with you with the auction catalog, again, no internet, and we would turn the pages together and mark things that you were interested in, and then I would kind of come back to you with a report. I've checked the condition, I've checked the provenance, and I would bid for you. I could call you and we'd do it together, or I could execute a bid for you.
And what happened if they didn't like what they bought?
Well,
Did that happen often?
No, it did not happen often. I don't really think I remember anybody.
Because I wondered if somebody makes, I put my hand up at the wrong time and I bought it.
There are
That's
some.
a
It is a
fear.
fast-moving thing.
It is a fear.
And it can happen. Generally, what happens is you don't get your hand up in time. It's that mistake.
Oh.
I'm saying to you, Joan, yes or no, yes or no, and the auctioneer says sold to the other guy.
And we're
And
still
you say yes.
too
We
late.
lost it. Yeah.
I
So
see.
I always primed my clients to just give me yes or no. And I wouldn't have any banter, because as soon as you're chatting, you miss your
You
opportunity.
miss your
So
opportunity.
I loved that part. I must say, I found that thrilling.
But that was on the edge. I always thought that was like so nerve-wracking. But you had all these other departments you talked about. Did you help? Did you go back and forth? Did
Yes.
you go to the jewelry department? Did you go to the wine department? I don't know.
Well, we would do everything for our clients. So if I was visiting you about contemporary art and you also had English silver, or in your case,
Exactly,
jewelry,
right.
I would be very astutely taking notes so that I could go to my
Colleague?
specialist, my colleague who's
I
a specialist
see,
in
I
another
see,
department, and
I
say,
see.
this lady has jewelry. You need to call Mrs. Quinn. So that would be an important thing, to keep our eyes out. And because I was the only specialist on the West Coast, I occasionally would look at, vintage maps, or, obviously
everything, right?
anything on the
Everything.
wall. I would go look, and I would take pictures front and back. I knew what to look for, even if I didn't have expertise. I knew how to look and how to document, take photographs, and look carefully.
So were you traveling with them? Did you go to New York for the auctions? Did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were used to this as part of your career.
Yes.
Travel was
I always
included.
commuted to New York. Yes.
Wasn't it? Wasn't. So after 13 years at Christie's, what happened?
After 13 years at Christie's, Larry Gagosian finally talked me into coming to work for him. He had asked me to work for him many times over the years.
And by the time 13 years went by, you moved from that fourth floor, or that Rodeo, to?
Yes. Well, during Christie's, we opened a beautiful space on Camden Drive.
On Camden. It was beautiful.
Beautiful, which is
Right.
now José
a
Ibert.
beauty shop.
It's now José Ibert. But I actually worked on that with the architects, and that was a lot of fun. We
That
built
was
a sale room.
Beautiful room. Beautiful.
And we had some sales here. Because of California state sales tax, many people preferred to buy in New York. And then there was also the resale law here in California that would added expenses to purchases. So we were a little reluctant to do the art sales here, but we had wine sales, car sales, jewelry sales, American paintings, and contemporary art sales
And
in
you
LA.
would use that space for lectures and luncheons. It was a beautiful space. So Larry hired you, which was just up the street a little bit on Camden.
Yes.
And did he have the gallery already?
Yes. He had the gallery already, which was designed by Richard Meyer.
And it was a beautiful white building, right?
Yes, still is.
It still is.
And
and while you're there, there's an expansion taking place.
he opened that gallery in 1995.
Wow.
And it was just the one side. You know, now it's a double. It was sort of the one, the shoebox size.
Yes.
And Richard Meyer did a beautiful gallery, and that was kind of unusual for a gallerist to use a world-renowned architect.
I was going to ask.
This is kind of Larry's style.
Why would you use an architect? You need 4 walls.
You need 4 walls, that's right. But Larry was a visionary, is a visionary, and he was moving the bar. It's now copied by other dealers who are attempting to use Larry's model. But Larry has used Annabelle Seldorf, Caruso St. John has done several of our galleries, no less than Jean Nouvel.
Right.
Did our Paris space at the airport. And recently,
that's
Y,
so great.
Coulapot did our San Francisco gallery just.
Yeah.
So that was Larry's idea, that the brick and mortar would be a very special component.
Coulapot did San Francisco?
Yeah.
Because he lives here, right?
Yes.
He does. So that's great. We're going to talk about the expansion. We're going to talk about the Larry Gagosian Gallery, but we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
What do you think it would be like to teach? Chances are, you have no idea. Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places, and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable. That's what it's like to teach.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to Beverly Hills View. We're talking to the director of the Larry Gagosian Gallery, Deborah McLeod. And we just were talking, Deborah, about the gallery that Larry had Richard Meyer design. And then it wasn't big enough. It's pretty big, but then you expanded south.
That's right. We took over the Umberto Hair Salon, if you recall, was our neighbor there on Camden Drive. And we doubled our space. We did that in 2010. And I think very serendipitously, the entire Richard Meyer team that built the gallery was still there. They built the gallery in 1990. That whole team was still there and came back on. So it was really shorthand between us.
We had the lead architect come in. I was on the architectural commission at the time. And that lead architect came in and talked about what he was going to do at
Michael
the Gagosian.
Palladino.
Yes, yes.
And he's still there. Michael's still very
Fantastic.
important.
And he made a really beautiful presentation. And at the architectural commission, we were really excited to have the architect come in instead of the contractor, the builder, the owner. So that was great.
Yeah.
And he built more of a loft space.
Well, when we
in a
took the
way.
space, we didn't know what we were going to find. And we sort of scooped it out like a pumpkin. And there, lo and behold, in the ceiling was this beautiful World War II bow truss ceiling.
Oh,
that we
that's why, because it looked gorgeous. It is like a loft space.
Yeah.
And you had already been instrumental in, like at Blum Helman, doing the gallery space and different
Christie's,
places.
I'd done both of those,
Christie
yeah.
space. So you were the perfect person to oversee this. Who do you work with?
Well, I worked with Alex Wu most closely, an architect there at Richard Meyer. And we had a very nice team. And as I say, there was almost a shorthand there because they knew Larry's insistence on quality. They knew Larry's style. And what needed to decide was, how would this second space be the same or different from the North Gallery?
And how does it do that?
It really has an other quality. I didn't want a mirror gallery. I just didn't want more
Enough
square
space,
feet.
right.
Yeah. So the North Gallery has quite a bit of Richard Meyer, especially as you look up. You feel his flourishes
Right.
in his architecture and his windows. And
So you can see your offices from upstairs
Yes.
in the second story, but you don't do that in the other space.
in the South Gallery, it's a little raw. You have this woody feeling there.
Right.
It feels almost a bit like a ship somehow. But the very beautiful Richard Meyer rolling door in front. It's a massive door that you roll open, a couple of cars could drive in, and poured cement floors. And there actually is a balcony office in the upper right corner there. So both spaces do have that
Oh, they
look
have
down.
that look down. They have the look
But they
down.
feel different. So you could do, let's say, a Richard Serra sculpture in the South Gallery and Ed Ruscha paintings in the North, and they would feel like two shows.
And do you do that?
We do that. And
Because
I
I know there's an Ed Ruscha show now, and it's both galleries.
Yes. What happened was, if you give an artist a cookie, how does that go? If you give an artist
give
the
a
North
dog a bone.
Gallery, they want the South Gallery. So so we're thrilled. We actually have two shows in the gallery now. They're both by Ed Ruscha. In the North Gallery, where you enter, we have Ed Ruscha prints and photographs. And in the South Gallery, we have Ed Ruscha Books & Co.
Oh, so you call it two different shows.
Well,
to me,
it
it was
is.
like fantastic all together.
One is about prints and photographs, and the other is about the book practice. So.
Why did you need all that space? Because here we are, as we talked, people, the reason they wanted to buy in New York, I guess, was for resale and taxes and everything. Have the collectors come back to LA?
Absolutely.
They have.
Absolutely.
So they feel there's a confidence in buying here.
You know,
It was kind of like a badge of honor to buy in New York. Oh, I was in New York.
correct. That's something that's probably not quite so much present. But yeah, people like to say, oh, I bought this from Leo, or I bought this at
Right.
Sidney Janis.
Right.
They really liked buying in New York and bringing it home. And if it was here in LA, if it was at Paul Cantor's gallery, they kind of didn't trust it somehow. Like, it's a lack of self-confidence somehow in your own region that, well, if it's here, it can't be as good as, why is it here?
Exactly. You buy it outside.
Yeah. So you
It
go
was
to
like-
Mecca to buy it.
Exactly. Or just like traveling. I mean, you're leaving your city to see something new.
Yes.
And they have the best. You go to
Right.
London, you go to New York. But it was
Right.
basically New York, wasn't it?
Yes, and New York, of course, still is the center of the art world, as much as people out here would like to think that we are now. We really
Right.
are not. New York certainly still is, but in the old days, LA was very much of a making center, but not a selling center.
So we had the artists
the
here
artists.
making. I see.
Yeah, but now people, I am in the lucky position, I think, of I've always been able to do most of my business with local people, with Los Angeles
You
clientele.
mean as your clientele,
Always.
buying art, suggesting art to them. Well, one thing, Larry's been very Beverly Hills centric. I mean, he lives in Holmby Hills next door. He opened his first gallery in West Hollywood, close by, Westwood actually, close by. Then a gallery on Robertson, close by. So in West Hollywood.
Yep.
So it was really natural for him to be here. And then
Yes.
how did he bring all these artists in? Who is in your stable here?
Well, we don't have separate stables at our various galleries.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, basically there are maybe 75 artists, that the gallery works with in one form or another. Some are very intimate and strong representation, full representation, and some are a little less formal.
But you say 75 within how many, 15 galleries around the world? Or
There are
how many?
16
Oh.
locations.
Wow.
But let's say that's calling 980 Madison, I think, 2 galleries when there are probably 4 or 5 actual exhibition spaces in the building. So
But
it's really
also
more.
New York, because there's 2 places, downtown and uptown, right? And in Paris, 2 places, because the one at Le Bourget is fantastic. Beautiful space. Where else? Paris. London, 2 spaces. They
3.
just 3. Right, Davies Street.
Davies Street is the little gallery in Mayfair, and
I
then
love
Britannia we had for many years, and now we've opened a huge gallery in Mayfair, which is Grosvenor Hill, and that has a Mark Grochon show now. That's really beautiful.
It's so beautiful. So an architect did that.
Caruso St. John.
Fantastic. Huge. I walked by one afternoon and you can't see in. But when you're inside, you can see out. It was very clever. because it brought the outside in, and the art was brilliant. Did he make it just for that place?
Yes, he did. Mark worked for a year or so, maybe a little longer.
And he lives here.
Mark lives here in Frogtown, which is what the
Grosjean,
artists call Silver Lake.
Right.
Yeah, Mark Grosjean is a great painter and a great sculptor, and it's really fabulous to have this show of sculptures, which of course all sold out before we opened.
Was beautiful. And we talked about Ed Ruscha, who also lives in Beverly Hills.
He does.
And as we were saying with Larry, this proximity to Beverly Hills, Ed's studio is in Culver City, close by, right?
Yes.
And the other artist who is in your gallery lives in a neighboring city, Santa Monica, Frank Gehry.
Frank Gehry,
Right?
that's been so much fun for me. This is a really joyous part of my job, is being the gallery liaison for Frank Gehry, who, of course, as we all know, is the greatest living architect, certainly one of them. And Frank has a sculpture practice. He makes beautiful sculptures, fish lamps,
Right.
and other sculptures too, but the fish lamps I think he's most famous for.
So he's an architect, but you call him an artist too.
He is an artist. I mean, we're not showing his architect's drawings, for instance. I mean, in which case I would say he's an architect,
I see.
and we show him. But he has this sculpture practice, so he's operating very much in that part of his life as an artist, making artist decisions. And he did these fish lamps in the early '80s. He made a couple of dozen of them and stopped. And 30 years later, after a few conversations, he decided to make a new body of work.
Because the fish were at the Walker. How
Yes.
many years ago was that? 30 years
Yeah,
ago?
30 plus.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I forgot he did that whole body of fish at the Walker and then probably showed it all over. I don't know. The great thing I thought about the exhibit, you used that new extension part
Yes.
of the gallery in Beverly Hills. Dark
Yes.
and the lamps hanging. It was absolutely brilliant.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was otherworldly, I thought. It was really fun to walk into that installation and be in that immersive environment.
But the other thing is, when we went to Paris, because he designed the space for
The Louis Vuitton
for the
Fondation.
Vuitton, which was great. He had in one of the I guess the cafe, his fish hanging, and they had they looked like goldfish. There was seemed like a different color light in it.
They're meant to make you think of koi, really.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah, that was his largest installation of fish to date. It was a commission for the building.
Oh, it was so
And
great.
it's a destination artwork, as we say.
It
It's
really
really fun.
was.
It's in the cafe there, so you eat underneath this swirling school of Frank Gehry fish.
And here we were standing at the platform with President Hollande and Frank, and looking over that way was all these goldfish floating around. It was such a brilliant thing. It was great. So here we have three people we talked about that are very LA centric, Beverly Hills centric, LA centric. We have this landmark sculpture in front of LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, on Wilshire Boulevard. And it all started with, I think, at your gallery, at Larry Gagosian's gallery. Tell us about Chris Burden.
Yeah, this is a sculpture called Urban Light, and it's made up of 202 street lamps, which Chris found various places, various vendors. He started buying them up, and then vendors of this type of material started finding Chris. And he proposed a group of these lamps to LACMA, and Michael Govan wanted this very much. Michael Govan has been an amazing champion of Chris.
Chris Burden had been collecting those, though, for years. They
Years.
were all laying out in the Topanga Canyon on
Rusting.
the top of the mountain, right?
Yes, rusting.
Just laying, rusting,
Yes.
rusting. I thought you said rusting. They were rusting.
Yeah.
So they had to do each part of that lamp, right, to refurbish it.
It's a big deal to refurbish these lamps. Yeah, it's very expensive, takes quite a bit of time, and he went through several vendors to figure out who could do it. But Chris loved them because the street lamps, which used to be all over Los Angeles, I think there were 50,000 of them, and now there's just a handful. But these street lamps really demarcated the demographics of the city. So in the fancy parts of town,
Oh, they're-
Glendale or what's the fancy part past Wilshire Boulevard?
Larchmont, Hancock
Park.
Right.
Hancock Park, for instance, had the most beautiful lamps, and these lamps went in sometimes before the houses even went in.
You know, I never knew
and
this.
it was to keep, yeah, they would have several bulbs and be very ornate.
Oh,
And then in the sort of the poorer, simpler part of town,
straight?
they'd just be, like a pencil with a single globe.
Right.
So Chris realized these were city planners thinking about the demographics, and so he loved brought them all together. And as you know, they're kind of, looks sort of like the Parthenon, the way it goes from low to high. And that every day of the year there are people romping inside the sculpture, and this is what Chris hoped for.
And it all started really with Gagosian's gallery, because he showed those lamps in London. I remember seeing them in 2000 maybe.
Yes,
and
he did.
He had a very small gallery, and there was a row of street lamps. And Chris Burden said we had to dig down the gallery floor into the cement to put them, but it looked like you were walking through palm trees.
Yeah, that
time.
feeling of entering the sculpture
Right.
was very important to Chris, because remember, Chris was a performance artist
Right.
in the 1970s, and when he
So that
moved to
was-
sculpture, he came as a performance artist. So your stepping into the thing was very important. That activates the sculpture and completes it.
It actually made an impression, because
Yes.
we're talking about it right
Yes.
now, not just an installation with some lamp posts up.
And you know, Chris was so important to Larry. Chris died May a year ago. It's such a terrible loss. We miss Chris every day.
I know.
But he was the first real artist, Larry always says, that he showed. He showed Chris in 1979.
So
So
does
that's his
go way
entire
back.
career.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I remember, just as an aside, when we were up at Chris's studio looking at the lamps, and Nancy said Nancy Rubens, his wife, who's also a fantastic sculptor and represented by your
Gagosian,
gallery,
yes.
said that he had made so many different paint colors to get the right color. Like he would test it at sunrise, at sunset, and that's what shows at LACMA.
Yes.
It seems like it changes, and
Yes.
it's only one color paint.
No, that's right. But all those decisions that a great artist makes,
Right.
you know, they might seem perfunctory, but Chris was really a perfectionist. And, you know, he was not like a floaty artist.
No,
you know,
was serious.
his mother was a scientist and his father was an engineer.
Right, he was very
and Chris
serious.
came at the practice like that. You know,
Yeah.
you've seen Metropolis 2
Right.
at LACMA with
Fantastic.
1,600
The
cars.
And everything looked, I remember in Cologne we saw the submarines hanging at a
Yes.
and it was like toys.
Yes.
But it was so memorable, just like
Yes.
the cars and just like the dirigible.
Yes, that was Chris's last work.
I know, that was
Sad to
beautiful.
say.
And talking about last works, we're almost out of time, but I know you do so much charity work. I don't want to put that on the side, because
Thank
I
you.
think the gallery helps with that so much. Larry Gagosian helps with that so much. And you work at Angel Food and the Silver Lake. I think the Silver Lake Conservatory of Music is great.
I'm so thrilled. I've been really giving them a lot of time
I
lately.
know you
That is Flea and Anthony's baby. That's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Both these guys grew up.
Anthony Kiedis.
Yeah, Anthony Kiedis and Flea, just goes by Flea.
Right.
I don't know if he wants me to say his name.
No.
But anyway, you know, both of them, music saved their lives as young hooligans. You know, they had kind of rough starts, both of them, and music saved their lives, and they want to give this opportunity to this needy, you know, the youth in our community.
So great.
Music lessons are made available to young kids. They've just bought a new building. They'll have their annual fundraiser in
Coming up.
coming up. Yeah.
But you're so good about giving art for the auctions and,
Yes,
and
I
raising
love to do
money.
it.
And
I
the
love to
other
do
thing
it.
is you've always gotten some artists for Angel Food, where you can sell the lithograph or whatever piece of art.
Yes, I'm a Project Angel Food. I sat on their board for many years. I'm not on the board now, but that's a great one. Project Angel Food serves severely ill people healthy meals. And you know, if you can afford a $5 meal, then you call Meals on Wheels. If you cannot afford
right.
anything, you call Project Angel Food. That's who we serve, and it's a fantastic, very, very laudable organization.
I wanted to make sure that we know you're not just selling art, you're
Right.
also helping other people.
Got to do it.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Joan.
Deborah McLeod, my old friend. Good to see you. And thank you for watching Beverly Hills View today. We'll see you next time.